Вітаю.
And we must continue this fight with Ukraine. And we will. As long as it's necessary, as long as Ukraine requires to win this war. But we must again stand united and help Ukraine now. Winter is coming. Ukraine needs air defense. Air defense now! 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 Help Ukraine 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 now! Russia is a terrorist state!
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 Stop Russia! Stop the war!
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 Возможно, конец, да. А почему? Они там... Ты попал? Я здесь. Живу тебе.
Bonjour. Et votre joie. Здорово. Що ми маємо? Чаю? О, кава є. Давай чаю.
Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава нації! Україна! Понад усе! Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Нашим славним захисникам і захисницям тричі!
Slava! 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 I did mention that the war is only going on because there are many who still trading with Russia and putting the Russian trade before anything else. And that's what fueled the war, because any money that Russia receives, they convert it into the more missiles, more drones, and more attacks over Ukraine. So by trading with Russia, it's money, it's your blood on the hands, the Ukrainian blood. Just a few facts that already been mentioned in the past. That this year, Turkey has brought the most of the Russian oil. They buy in approximately 100,000 barrels per day from Russia. That's 1.4 million tons last year. India continued trading with Russia. India is buying the Russian resources and they establishing factories to produce weapons. Don't forget that India is buying about 50%, up to 50% of the weapon. The biggest importer, one of the biggest importer of the Russian weapon. And plus, they put in factories up together. Don't forget about the Iran who supplied the drones. Don't forget about the North Korea. It's just a list of the short countries who directly involved in this war. The war that Russia feels that they're gonna continue to fight. They continue and fighting only because they have this backing and support. Directly or indirectly, they have this backing and support of those countries and few more. When we say about sanctions against Russia, we shouldn't be underestimating them. And they worked to a certain extent, and they are working. But if there is a pause between the sanctions, or if there are the gaps in between the sanctions, the Russia will learn and try to cross-navigate. They adapt, and they using any gaps in the sanctions to try to continue trade, to continue business as usual. The sanctions must only increase, and they must only become stronger and stronger. Not against the few tens of individuals or tens of companies with each new sanction, but there must be total isolation of the Russian businesses from the world. The total isolation of the businesses from the global trade. Because the trade and not enough sanctions is fueling this war. So there must be total isolation of the Russian businesses from the global trade until they stop this brutal war in Ukraine, until they withdraw from Ukraine and stop fighting and go home. They need total embargo on their resources, on their gas, on their oil, on their diamond and gold, their weapon. Total embargo. Total embargo on Russia.
Total embargo on Russia!
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 Stop trade with Russia.
Stop trade with 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 When the Russia withdraw from the grain deal in the summer, they thought they're going to dictate to the rest of the world that they withdraw and that's it, and the trade will be stopped. But Ukraine is committed to send the ships and grain to those who need it the most. They were committed before the war and they're still committed today. With Russian invasion, it just become more and more difficult. But Ukraine commitments to help those in need when Ukraine needed help itself is unquestionable. And Ukraine continue to supply the world with the grain through the different routes. New routes been established because Ukraine is learning, adapting, but they are, most importantly, they committed to the agreement to help the world, to help those who need it in Africa and Asia. And Ukraine is standing by these commitments. And the world must stay committed behind the Ukraine. Must stay committed as they promised in 1994 when Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapon. When the world stood and guaranteed Ukraine protection. They must go back to this guarantee and protect Ukraine by all means to win. Not just not to lose, but to win this war and to push the aggressor to where they came from. When as Ukraine committed with the grain deal, the world must be committed and guarantee Ukraine protection. Protection against this modern threat. The threat that will not be contained only in Ukraine if it's gonna break through. The threat that comes from the one source, which is Russian Federation and the like, but this threat will expand. Because terror needs fuel and they need to expand. The terror cannot be contained by one territory. The terror needs fuel to expand and to fuel and expand their ambitions. And if it won't be contained in Ukraine, the Russia will plant the more terror and threat to the rest of the world and other countries. No one is safe until the Russia will be unable to fight this war and to continue commit the crimes and terrorize the entire world, to terrorize its neighbors, to terrorize its minorities in Russia or the European countries who border with Russia. And it's not surprise that the countries are closing the borders now. Slowly, but they're closing the borders with Russia because they seek protection. They want to be protected and ready because they alert and awaken now. And they can clearly see what comes from that side. It took a long time for the countries to awaken, too long. But the countries are awakened, and the aim is to convince the other countries who still trading with Russia, who still think that the business with Russia must be continued, to rethink and take a full control for the action, for the future of this world, for the future and peace in this world. Because they current trade with Russian terrorist regime, their business as usual with Russia has got their consequences, severe consequences that can lead into the far greater conflict, if it's possible to imagine. They must rethink. And I'm just trying to knock, and maybe someone will hear me, who's still trading with Russian regime, to rethink and take full control and responsibility for their action, for their quick profit on the way of the uncertainty and the Russian low prices to rethink and stop all these trades with Russian terrorist regime. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Захисникам України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Last year, when the Russia blew up the Kakhovka Dam, everyone was saddened and awakened by the true scale of disaster that happened just overnight. And everyone was saddened and thinking about the catastrophe that happened back then. But this was short duration. They all forgot and move on. Why? Because they're not directly involved with that. Because it's not happened over their territories. Because it's happened somewhere far away. Anything happen on our planet, what's happening in Europe, will have a direct consequences. It might not happen overnight, but everything we do has got consequences for every actions or inactions. When the war in Ukraine is going on, we should not stay silent. We should not try to make a peace and sit down and talk with Russian terrorist regime, because this will only buy them time. This will only make them stronger. And this is what they want. But this isn't what the world wants. No. The world wants to have a peace restored. Ukrainians want this war to be over, as no one else. Ukrainians are fighting for this peace with their own men and women and blood. The Russia want to sit down and talk, but every single discussion they had in the past led only until they only led for them to break the agreements. They only led for them to stop for the only short moment, and then to launch the new larger scale invasion. All the discussions in the past over the last 10 years brought no peace, because Russia only wants control and the war. If they wanted the peace, they would invade Ukraine. If they wanted the peace, they would have stopped fighting a long time ago and go home. They did not stop fighting since they launched the full-scale invasion, not a single day. If the country wants a peace, they will not continue to bomb civilians, to destroy their land, and kill and murder and torture people. Don't forget how many Ukrainians has been captured and imprisoned in unhuman conditions, in terrible conditions. And I'm glad that there are lots of talks about the exchange of prisoners happening at the moment. But the sad story is that majority of the prison exchange Ukrainians are returning home on the shields. They're returning home either seriously injured or their body brought back home on the shields. And this is the brutal reality of this war. Russia doesn't want to return Ukrainians who are pro-Ukrainian and who will be able to continue this fight. And Ukrainians are losing the best of our sons and daughters. Russia don't care. They never cared about their own people and they care less about Ukrainians. But we do. We value every single one who defending Ukraine. And we cannot afford to lose anyone. Ukraine has already lost many sons and daughters. Brightest future of Ukraine. And they will take decades, if not centuries, to replace this generation of the Ukrainians who would have, in a peaceful time, worked towards the future, towards the making Ukraine better and brighter and more economically strong. But they choose to put their life on hold and to defend Ukraine. This is a sad truth, and that's the price that Ukraine is paying. And this is worth fighting for. Remember, Ukraine is fighting for the freedom. Ukraine is fighting for the future, for their own children. Many of Ukrainian children, I hope they will return home, because Russia, when they annexed the territories, they forced the Ukrainian children from orphanages, from their families. They've been separated and sent back to across the Russian territories. They were sent to Belarus and Russia. Many children, I just hope for their well-being. And I hope that they actually will return home and they'll be reunited with their families. What about those children who lost their parents because of this brutal invasion of the Russian terrorist state? This is a terrible loss and tragedy of the world scale for what's happening now in Ukraine. It's too great to be silent and think about this as something distant. Everything happening now in Ukraine directly will affect Europe, and is affecting now. That's why we have to continue this support to Ukraine. Help and fight for Ukraine against this terror. We must not show the fatigue and let the fatigue to kick in and let Russia to become stronger. We will continue support Ukraine, and this rally will go on. We now hear every week, Wednesdays 6 to 8, Fridays 6 to 8, and Sundays 3 to 5. There might be changes in the future when we go back to the original schedule on Saturday, but that will be announced. But at the moment, we hear Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. 6 short hours of our day-to-day life here, just to remind the world about the terrible crimes, about Russia committing crimes, committing terror, committing ecocide in Ukraine, committing the ecological disaster of the global scale that went way beyond the Ukraine. The Black Sea now, that borders with Turkey, Bulgaria, Hungary, the borders with Georgia, they not longer safe because of the Russian aggression and the war in Ukraine. The Black Sea used to be the paradise, and the retreat, summer retreat for many, is not safe. Ukraine is not safe. Ukraine territory, 1/5 of Ukraine, has been infested with the bombs and landmines. That will take generation to return back to the normal. That's a true scale tragedy that happened because of one country that felt power and expected inaction from the world, led by the world previous inaction and the hesitation and delay to launch this terrible through-scale war in Ukraine. 10 years. That's the longest war that anyone ever fought. In 10 years, the Russia been destroying Ukraine, destabilizing Ukraine. 10 years of war. That's one of the longest war in history. Enemy is the same. Russian regime. Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 I'm going to read one poem, just the one poem, just to. That poem is in Ukrainian, so I didn't translate it to English. You just try to catch the melody of the poem, and I promise I'll translate and I'll post it later in
Да?
English.
Один раз, а потом?
But that poem is from Василь
Если
Симоненко,
планується, будуть часто.
and
Да, именно так.
it's called «Можливо, знову загримлять гармати». Василь Симоненко. Можливо, знову загримлять гармати, і танк зімне пшеницю на лану, і буде плакать і журитись мати, коли сини ітимуть на війну. І хтось востаннє поцілує милу, і хтось сльозу непрохану змахне, а може дехто втратить віру й силу, своє життя рятуючи одне, але не я. Як виснути не стану, хоч як не буде боляче мені, за нашу землю, дорогу й кохану, я рад прийняти на себе всі вогні. За тих дітей, що бігають до школи, за матерів змарнілих у труді, за рідні наші верби довгополі, за наші дні прекрасні й молоді. І тут ні сліз, ні відчаю не треба, і тут не треба страху і ниття. Живе лиш той, хто не живе для себе, хто для других виборює життя. As I said, I'll promise to translate it and post it later. This poem is about the love to Ukraine. It's about the self-sacrifice that Ukrainians are doing now, defending their sons, daughters, families. It's about the self-sacrifice for what they truly do believe. Thank you. Героям слава. That's about giving up the best of themselves for what is really matter, for what's beyond the person or individual. And that's what motivates Ukrainians defend their homeland. Because it's far greater than simply think about themselves. That's about thinking about what this war brought on us and what the outcome and what future we have if we do little or nothing or do absolutely zero. Because as I said before, there are consequences for any actions we do and inactions that we do. And how we live with that, it's entirely up to ourselves. We should be looking for better of ourselves and find the true meaning of what this world must be and could be, and the best of ourselves to make this world a better place. Without this terror, without the crimes, without the war, without this Russian propaganda that only aim to destabilize people, minds, governments, countries, and to plant the fear, terror across the world. Thank you. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! Україна! Захисникам України тричі! Слава! 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 This rally is coming to the end. Just to remind again for those who join us, we here again this Friday and then Sunday. This rally here 6 to 8 Wednesdays, 6 to 8 Fridays, and 3 to 5 on Sundays. If you have any questions, come around and ask. During the rallies you can ask and go to see our great volunteers in the market just on the left from me, who will tell you the latest information if you want to know, who will sell the merchandise. Everything they sell over there goes towards helping Ukraine and those who need it most. The volunteer organization is way more than what you can see here. It's a lot of hard work and many people involved behind the stage who doesn't come public, but they working every day, large or small, towards one goal, towards one common goal. It's a victory of Ukraine and future of Ukraine against this terror. Thank you. We're going to have a national anthem now.